As you all know, you're here today because I'm going to present the UX Research Scoping Canvas, which is a tool that I created a couple of months ago. I've been waiting to have an opportunity to present it in a webinar for a while now. For those who don't know me, my name is France. I am the founder and CPO of Tandems. I am a designer by trade with over 7 years of experience, and in my work as a designer, I've always been in charge of doing research, so I've been doing UX research for about the same time. 4 years ago, I created Tandems, which is a tester's self-service recruiting platform for all user research needs. Our mission is to help companies, product teams connect easily with participants from all over the world to get quality insight for their research. We have over 200 clients, mostly startups, scale-ups, and enterprise companies from Europe, and we recruit internationally. So working for so many clients in UX research and as a CPO, there's always a couple of questions, that keep me up at night a bit. And two of those questions are, the first one would be, why is it that some teams don't do research, even though research is essential? And we all know some of the answers: lack of maturity, lack of resources, lack of budget. But this is not today's subject. Today, I want to focus on the other question that keeps me up at night: is among teams that do research, what is it that will make their efforts fail? And why is this an important question? Is because, as you all know, if you're here tonight, research is still an element that we struggle to show the result for. The ROI of research is a big topic. Some teams will not have the budget. So if you do have the budget to do research and then the efforts fail, you don't get the insights you want, then it's just a possibility next time that you won't be able to do it. People will think that it's not useful. So that's why this is a very important question for me. And whenever I think about it, I get kind of let's say PTSD, at least flashbacks from a time when I was a junior designer. And I was a junior at an agency. I was working for this new client, just assigned to his project. And it was maybe my second project in my whole career. He wanted to build an app from the ground up. He wanted to do something about security in the streets, but it was for not just an idea. And so we had sold a discovery phase of about 2 weeks to help him understand his final users a bit more. When the time for the brief came, this is basically the conversation we had, and barely exaggerated. I asked him what his vision for his product was, and he told me that he didn't know because he wanted to build a vision on what he discovered in the discovery. He asked me what my hypothesis is. I asked him what his hypotheses were, and he told me he didn't have any because he was waiting for the discovery. I asked him if he had any idea of the profiles he wanted to talk to for the research, and he said that basically he wanted to talk to everyone. So finally asked him if there was anything specific he wanted to learn during this phase of discovery, and he told me that he wanted to learn as much as possible. So as you can see, I had very vague, very broad scope for this research. After the 2 weeks, a couple of interviews and something like 200 answers on a survey, he asked me, okay, what are the results? What should my mission be? What should my vision be? And I tell him, well, actually, we have very vague and superficial results. It's very hard to get anything out of it. And so this is a case where the research had been done and the stakeholders believed in the value of research. They believed it so much in it that they wanted to build everything on that research. But there was no results. And when I said there were no results, there were no real insights. There were no actions that we could take from what we learned, because we didn't learn much. And so needless to say, we had a very shaky foundation from the app. So when we actually built it, the app failed. And to me, the root cause of this failing has always been that because everything was rooted on this research, but the research was so badly scoped, badly framed, badly planned, that there was no hope for achieving any type of results, or at least not achieving the expected results from that research. So that's me and my experience, but I wanted to ask also if that was, if I was alone in this. And so a couple of weeks ago, I sent out a poll on LinkedIn where it was a very simple, broad stroke poll. I'm not trying to be like statistically significant here, just trying to measure a pulse. Wondering if other people felt like among the 4 steps of research, so planning, recruiting, execution, and analysis, if there was one point where the mistakes would make the research efforts fail the most. And it looks like 57% of people agreed with me. So then it begs the question, what makes research fail, planning fail? Why is it that we frame our research badly? In my case, it's just a case of me being a bit too junior, not really knowing better, not having really any kind of framework for which to build my research upon, and not knowing how to challenge my clients. Sorry, I lost my track. So not really knowing how to challenge my client on his decisions, and so not being able to tell him, okay, but if you want us to do this discovery, you have to think about those questions first before we go in. Over the years with tandems, I've also seen teams dive into the research without preparation, either from overconfidence or lack of foresight, or because there was pressure from some other team or from higher ups who wanted research, but who made them dive in without really checking that they were aligned, that expectations were aligned, and knowing what they were looking for. So this is basically how I got to the conclusion that there has to be a better way to frame the research. And that brought me to one realization, which is, hey, guess what? I'm an entrepreneur. So as an entrepreneur, all of the accelerators, incubators, different mentors, they will always tell me, okay, but don't dive into building your solution too fast. Take a step back, have an overview of your business, of your market. Make sure that you have this high-level view before you go into building, into doing. And they have a bunch of tools to help entrepreneurs doing that. Several of them are what we call canvases. So some of you might be familiar with the Lean UX canvas. This one is the business model canvas. The idea is that they are this A3 format, so they fit in one page. And they cut the thought processes into little boxes. And each box has a limited space, so you have to be really straight to the point. And I really find those canvases efficient because they can be used however you want. They're very versatile. They can be used alone or in teams. You can take your time to fill them in, or you can do everything in a workshop because everything is quite short. And afterwards, you do feel this level of higher level view that you gain over your business and your market. And if there's one box that you couldn't fill, then it gives you kind of this red flag of, okay, but there's this key element that I should know that I don't know. And so there's a gap in my knowledge that I should fill in before I continue. And so it's kind of combining those two ideas that led me to creating the UX Research Canva. Yes, and this will be available as a recording to watch again later. Unless Zoom bugs out and doesn't record, but I think we are recording, so that should be fine. Yes, we are recording. So yeah, I am introducing the UX Research Scoping Canvas. It's this thing. It looks like this. It's a 10-step canvas, 1 to 10, cut into 2 parts. One part is the 5 steps to frame your research. By framing, I mean defining why you're doing the research. And we do this framing process because we want to align expectations, make sure we involve the right stakeholders, and uncover any type of assumptions we might have. The second part is the planning process, 5 steps to plan and to define how we're going to do the research. And in those steps, we're going to establish the means and the methods. We're going to make sure we know what resources are available to us, be it in terms of human resources, tools, timing, and budget. And of course, make sure that if we have constraints, we know about them. Welcome to everyone who's joined recently. Caroline is asking how we can get the file. We'll give you links at the end of this video on where to get it. So how about when we have not much or any info about the target? It's a great question. I guess we'll get to it when we get to step 6. But so let's dive straight into it and keep going with those questions. Clearly, I'd rather answer the question as they go, especially if they're about specific steps. I think it's much more interesting to explore those while we go through the canvas rather than in one go at the end. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through the canvas step by step. For each step, I'm going to explain how to fill it in, and I will give 1 or 2 examples of things that could go in the step. And I will, for this, use 2 high-level examples. One would be a startup that is building a wellness app and that has already launched, and they are having trouble with this business model, and a traveling agency that is maybe has a foot in the whole world but wants to go bigger in Europe. So let's dive straight in. Okay, so this is my fig jam. Actually, to one part of the answer, Caroline, is that I made the canvas available on FigJam. It's on Figma community right now, so you can use it as however you want. So the first step of the framing part is the business questions. What do we want to learn about the product and the business? This is the why of the research. Usually, it's the whole reason why we're wanting to conduct it. And there's usually it's pretty straightforward because, I mean, you know why you want to do the research. The research doesn't just appear in your mind. But there are bad examples of what a business question could be. A business question it cannot be something as broad as what do people want? Why is that? Usually when teams or companies come to me with those very broad business questions, to me, it's kind of a red flag. It means that there is a strategic layer somewhere that is missing, and the team or the company did not do their job thinking out their market, their vision, their mission, where they're going, their roadmap. And so they're just trying to use research as a magic 8-ball, something that's going to magically unlock all of the answers. And the goal of this business question is to ensure that you know, for instance, if you're working with stakeholders with little maturity in research, that you understand what they're trying to learn, what they're trying to achieve, and if it's too broad for you to be able to challenge them and try to narrow it down. So an example of our more narrowed down question would be, for instance, for my, so there will be a blue app and a yellow agency. For my blue app, which is my wellness app I was talking about, a more specific example would be, why are our user conversion activation rates on site not up to expectations? Why is that more specific? It's more specific because it's linked to a KPI. Well, in this case, 2 KPIs. It has a specific point where we want to focus in the product. It's not the whole product. It's just the sign up. And it can be measured. Okay, the numbers are not written here, but if you wanted, you could give the measure of the objective you wanted to have. And in terms of the yellow agency, it could be something around that. How might we attract a younger demographic in Europe? So imagine you're a travel agency, you already have a good footing in the world, and the strategy of the company is to get bigger market share in Europe. And clearly, this is a type of business question that shows that the company has done their market research, their market understanding, and has decided on a strategy. And the research is just going to help with attaining the strategy. I will get back to the business questions in a bit when we get to the step 3. So I'll just move on to step 2 for now, unless you have any questions. Step 2 is the involved stakeholders. Here we wonder who or what teams are going to care about what we unveil in our research or will be impacted by the research. The idea is to detect early enough who needs to be involved in the research so that you can plan communication and foster collaboration as soon as possible. This is really to maximize the impact of your findings so that you, if you know that you'll need help or allies from another team or maybe buy-in from certain people, or just to avoid the uncomfortable situation where you've done your research and then you present it and then someone from another team says, okay, but that's all nice and all, but we've already launched our new marketing campaign and it has nothing to do with what you just did. It actually goes against it, but it's already launched, so, tough luck. And that would really, really minimize the impact of your findings. So really the idea here is to make sure you don't miss anyone who should be looped into your research. What's happening? For 2 examples, for instance, for my blue app, maybe, oh, what did I do here? For my blue app, maybe we have a data team that has existing user data and we will need their help. Maybe the customer care team, they will need to update their processes because maybe if we change the onboarding, we're going to change some of their processes. So they should know in advance so that it's not a surprise. And maybe for our yellow agency, maybe we know already that their marketing team has some assumptions already, and that we want to take them into account in our later hypothesis to make sure we either validate or invalidate them. Or maybe we have a head of sales somewhere that's whose key concern is the development of the European market, and so we should loop them in so that they know what we are doing and what we are uncovering. If there's no question on the second part, could we get the finished canvas with all the sticky notes on Figma? And asked. I guess yes. I haven't. I will need to republish it, but I don't think that's an issue. If that's what you want. The third step is the research questions, and the research question is the main course. If there's one thing in the frame steps, the 5 frame steps that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed well, is the research question. And this is what we want to learn about the people and the users. The goal here is really to see what user knowledge we are lacking that will help us find the right solutions for our business question. And here I'm going to get back to my slides and open a parenthesis, but it's a very important parenthesis. And is this business questions, research questions, what's the difference? Why is it important? The business question is something that's product or business centric. It will ask questions in the likes of, are users going to like what you're building? What should we build next? Are they going to pay for X or Y? Are they going to pay an amount? Is there a preference between this or that? Will they like us? Things like that. Those are product centric because their main goal is to improve the product or make the business grow. And they could be removed from users. Research questions, on the other hand, are user-centric. And the reason why they're different is because if you go with those questions on the left and you go ask someone, what do you prefer, what solution I should build, users can't really answer that. They can tell you what they imagine could be built, but that doesn't mean that it should be built. But what can they answer? They can answer questions about themselves. They can answer about why they're using a certain tool, what pain points or obstacles they have on any journey, if they have alternatives, what they have already paid for a tool and why that one and not another one. How they feel about your brand or other brands. These are things that they can answer. And the whole thing with research and the whole reason I'm putting both of those questions on the canvas is because I want to help teams make sure they make this difference and that make sure they go through this process, which is you go from the business question to the research question. The research questions will bring user knowledge, and from that user knowledge, you will build product solutions. But what we really want to avoid is doing this shortcut of having business questions being asked directly to users, so that thinking that they will bring user knowledge, whereas all they're going to bring is user, how do you say that in English? Guessing. They will be just guesses. They will just be guessing about your product and your business. And that's not what you want, because that's not how you build a good foundation for your research. So yeah, parenthesis closed. But this is very important. So if you have any questions, please let me know. This is like, if there's one thing you need to remember from the whole canvas, is this part. And there's a reason why I made the research questions box bigger. And right after the business question that involves stakeholders, is because we need to have the stakeholders see the difference, because in the end they need to understand that what we are going to answer with the research is not that directly, is the research questions first, and then from the answers to these questions we might be able to answer those business questions. If we ask the users directly to answer those, we're basically asking users to do our jobs for us. Again, magic 8-ball research. That's not a thing. That shouldn't be a thing. So getting back to my examples, let's go a bit fast. But do users feel any pain points with our current onboarding process? So for our Blue app, we can have questions that are like this. We are wondering about how we can improve our sign up and activation rates. Maybe what we're trying to learn in terms of research is any pain points with the current onboarding process, or maybe there's gap between their problems and objectives and how the product is solving them. So we need to understand what problems they're trying to solve. Or maybe we have a value proposition on a website that is skewed and makes users believe something when they sign up, which is not right. And so we need to change that. So we need to understand what they perceive from our website, so that we can potentially improve on it. Maybe on the other product, our travel agency, maybe the research questions are more in the likes of, since we're trying to get a new market in Europe, we want to understand how we can address the market, how the people in this market react. And so we need, for instance, to understand how they choose their destinations. We need to understand what's the timeline of their decisions, who makes decisions so we can address the right people, what type of budgets they have so that we can have the right pricing. Those are all real research questions, because those can be answered by users, but this is not something that users can answer. So I see that there are no questions on step 3, so I'll move on to step 4 and 5. Those are go a bit together. Step 4 is, what do we already know about research? The goal here is that, especially if companies that are not that have existed for a while, usually you already have knowledge, and the goal is to avoid duplicating work, and it's also to know what data we have, what's up to date, what's not up to date, and what we can build upon, so that we can build our hypothesis behind. Existing knowledge can come from external sources. This is what we call secondary research. It can come from your analytics. It can come from your other teams, because they have direct contact with your users or clients. It can be from social media or online comments, or it can come from prior research. For instance, maybe in our for our blue app, maybe we already have some knowledge. For instance, we know that there's a big drop rate on the step 4 of the onboarding. And the idea is to link to the analytics so that everyone can access that information. So that if some stakeholders get to the canvas and it's like, okay, but why do you say that? They can directly get access to the information. There's a couple more examples here that could... Thank you, Mariano. Have a good evening. And of course, you will receive the video once it's recorded and uploaded. For our yellow agency, maybe we already have reports that come from other companies on the evolution of travel in Europe post-COVID, for instance, or it could be that we had a previous research interviews where we have uncovered some things about our users, but we don't know if it's because it was all ages. The idea would be to see if that data is still correct. On the other hand, on step 5, we have our hypothesis. The goal of this box is to make sure that you surface all of the assumptions that you have in about this research. The thing is that we want to think that we're going to research completely neutral, but that's not possible. As humans, we all have biases. It's important to detect them and fight them in the future. And for that, you need to understand what are people's current intuitions on the business problem that we're having or on the research question that we're having. Especially coming from stakeholders. That's also why step 4 and 5 are next to each other. The idea here is to also help you separate what's fact, so knowledge, insights, what's fact from what's intuition, so something that could be right or could be wrong and could be coming from bias or could be completely on point, but we don't know yet. For instance, maybe in our yellow or traveling agency, maybe they think that the intuition is that younger people want cheap and don't care about eco-friendly travel or destination travel. This is an intuition. There's nothing in the existing knowledge that backs this intuition, and so we should take that with a grain of salt. And maybe in our blue app, there is this feeling among the team that there's an issue with the onboarding because it's too long or that the value proposition is not clear. And so we want to redo the whole website, but clearly before we actually redo the website, we should make sure that this intuition is validated. So step 4, step 5, facts versus intuitions, making sure that the team is aligned on what we already know, what we think is possibly an explanation for some user behavior or some business problems that we might have, but we are not 100% sure. This is the end for the first part, the part 1 framing. So we're going to move to part 2, unless there's any questions here. One thing that I want to add is that one of the reasons I separate part 1 frame and part 2 plan into 2 different sections is because you might not want to do both sections with the same people. The framing is really about getting a high level understanding of why we're doing the research, making sure that expectations are aligned on what we're going to answer. eDest, we're going to answer the research questions, not directly the business questions. And so that you can also fact check what are people's intuitions, so that if you come back with findings that go against their intuitions, they are not surprised. But these people might not be the ones that need to know about the detailed planning of the research. So you could do part 1 frame with some people and part 2 plan with other people. If there's any question, feel free to tell me. Otherwise, I'm just gonna move on because time is ticking. So let's go with the step 6. Step 6 is the target audience. What are emotional criteria? I'm going to get to it very soon, Patrick. Thanks for your question. First of all, the target audience, the idea is to help you understand who will be the right people to answer our research question. Shouldn't That's a good question, Mariel. So Mariel is asking if we should the target audience be done with the PMs or the stakeholders. It can, definitely can. It really depends on your team. I'm not saying that you should do frame and plan with different people. I'm just saying that you can if you want, especially if in this you involving, I don't know, for instance, the head of sales. Maybe they don't need to know the ideal part of the planning, but yes, if you're working especially on evaluating a feature and you will want the PMs to be part of this the whole planning section. So I was getting at the broad description. So why is there a broad description part? Because from my experience at Tandem's, that's what people have when they start. But usually they come here with this type of broad description, something like, I want to talk to people who love traveling. Where is it? Here. I want to talk to young people in Europe who travel. Or I want to talk to people who are interested in well-being apps. And those are not very good examples of a description. That's why they're in red. Why is that? And here I'm going to yet again open a new parenthesis about targeting. This is something that's pretty important, and that's why the audience targeting part is kind of big, because I really want to help people get out of just using a broad description and not going into the details. Let's say you have a population, that's the world population. Usually the broad targeting that people are gonna come with is a subset of the population that's their target audience for their app. So yes, you are a travel agency, you want to talk to people who travel. You are a well-being app, you want to talk to people who care about their mental health. Great. But the thing is that you're not just you don't want to just talk to the audience that's right for your product. You want to talk to the audience that's right for your research. And the truth is that people who are relevant for your research are just a subset of people in general. And I like to take an example here of one of our clients at Tandems, who is a job board for students. They have the first time they came to see us, they told us, we want to talk to students because we are a job board out for students. Great. But then they neglected to think of there are French startups, so they mostly have jobs in France. So students that are exchange students from abroad and who are going to look for jobs back in their country are not in their targets, not for that research at least. That people who have not do not need to do an internship this year are probably not in the target, because even if they go into the research, it just be like, oh sure, yeah, I need to find an internship, but that like in 2 years. So really, right now I'm not concerned by that yet. So really, the point of this whole audience targeting step is to help you narrow down this subset of people who are right for your research, not just right for your product. Oops. So a broad description that would be more accurate, for instance, for our Blue app is, for instance, we're just not just talking to people who are interested in well-being, we're talking to people who are churn users or people who use well-being apps but don't not ours, or people who don't use well-being apps but practice some kind of mindfulness and try to take care of their mental health. And this is more interesting because for what we're trying to understand, which is problems with the onboarding, problem with sign up, those are the people who actually might have relevant information. People who use our app well, who love our app, are not going to be the right target. And people who don't care about well-being apps, like they have practices but they really really don't care, would not be the right people either. For our yellow agency, a better option would be, for instance, Europeans between 20, let's say 25 and not 20, where is it? There, 25 and not 35, who have organized a long or short trip in the last 6 months. It's much more specific, and it does specify an age range because the idea is to talk maybe to working people who pay from their own pockets. Actually, an even better example would be to add that the fact that they pay from their own pocket. Want them to have organized. That means they need to be a decision maker, so they cannot be just followers. And the trip needs to be in the last 6 months so that it's recent enough to talk about, so that they actually can share their experience with those 4 questions. Let me know if you have any questions. And here, that part description is all nice and stuff, but as I said, my goal here is to help you really get into the details, how you can actually narrow down as close as possible to the people who are valid for your research. And this brings me to the idea of the criteria. And there are 3 types of criteria. There's behavioral criteria, there are emotional criteria, some people call them psychographic, and there are demographic criteria. Behavioral criteria are things that can be observed or measured. So usually it's something that if you spent a day or a week with someone, at the end you could say, okay, I noticed that you did this 5 times, and whenever you do this, you tend to do this at the same time. And those are things that you can see and measure. Emotional criteria are inherently things that happen inside of people, and so in order to understand it, you need them to verbalize it. So even though you can see that someone from their facial expression that they're happy or unhappy, you do not know why, you don't know how much, you don't know what intensity of happiness it is until they've been able to tell you. But because humans are so bad at describing their own experiences, these emotional criteria are not very accurate and kind of subjective by essence. And that's why I separate them, because those are things that you sometimes, the first ones, you can probably find a way to capture very accurately. The second ones, you have to keep in mind that people are going to, sometimes they're not going to be exactly how you imagine them to be. And the last ones are demographic criteria. Those are criteria that help you narrow down an audience. They're not here as a strict requirement. It's not because someone is 24 and not 25 that they suddenly do not fit into your demographic anymore, in your audience anymore. It's just that with that demographics, you have a higher chance of finding the right people, because let's face it, with research, time is often constrained, and so you cannot ask everyone and anyone. I saw that there's a question in the chat. Let me just look at it. Or at least something to this has some specific demand. I think you have a very interesting question, Patrick. I think we could come back to it at the end once we've done gone through the whole canvas, and then get back to it. Is that okay with you? So getting back here, I'm not gonna do everything because I'm looking at the time tick and we should get to move on. Just for our mindfulness app, well-being app, sorry. So there's 2 different category users. There's the churned users, and maybe the definition of the churn user in terms of behaviors is someone who has signed up but not finished the onboarding, or has signed up but didn't take any action after signing up, and where the sign up is less than 6 months, just because that's where the memory is freshest, and we are sure they can explain to us why they stopped using the app. But for non-users, mainly what we want is people who practice a type of mindfulness. They practice a type of mindfulness. Maybe they've heard of us, or they use a competitor's app, and this way we can understand why they what is the value proposition of that other app? Why would they choose them? What made them stick with them? In order to compare their experience with us with their experience with others. Emotional criteria, I will not get into it right now. As I said, those are things usually, are you attached to a brand? How do you feel about, do you have like, are you subject to stress at work? And those are things that are internalized. For instance, for this, it could be a mix of people who are feel in control of their mindfulness practice schedule and others who don't, so that you can have different perspectives. Again, we're separating them because we know that those are more objective and those are more subjective, and so it's more difficult to target. That being said, if you can turn an emotional criteria into a behavioral criteria, it could be help you be more accurate. For instance, things like you want to talk to people who are fans of heavy hard rock metal. Okay, that's not something you're gonna ask, are you a fan of heavy metal? But you can ask to what type of concerts they go to, what type of music they listen to the most, and that will give you a better idea of how engaged they are with that type of music. But the thing is that because there's still this layer of interpretation, it might not be too accurate, but at least you'll know that the person does listen a lot of that music or not. Was this part 6 clear? Should I move on to part 7? If there's no question, I'll just move on to part 7. The seventh step is where we choose our methodology. So we know why we're doing our research, why we're trying to uncover. We know who the target audience is, who are the people who are going to answer the research questions. Now the question is, how are we going to get them to answer the research questions? You could just, if you know exactly what you're doing, you could just dive straight into the description and just say, okay, we're going to do user interviews, or we're going to send out a survey, or we're going to do a mix of a diary study and ethnographic study. Great. But if you are having a hard time finding your methodology, I did put here a little bit of a helper to help you gauge the need of your research. So do you want it to be generative or evaluative? Do you want it to be more quantitative or qualitative, more behavioral or attitudinal? And here comes another parenthesis. I would just like to go through a bit of those definitions, just so that if someone in the audience tonight is not very familiar with them, so that we can you can get an idea of what I mean by that. So those 3 scales: generative, evaluative, behavior, attitude, qualitative, quantitative. First of all, generative, evaluative. Generative basically means a research that you do in order to understand deep-seated motivations and behaviors, and your goal is often to discover innovation opportunities and generate new ideas. In other places, you will call that discovery or exploratory research. On the other hand, evaluative research, or otherwise known as formative or summative research, is more incremental. The idea is to measure performance and efficiency, and through that detect friction, pain points, or validate solutions, or uncover improvement points. We go from an existing thing, product, service, and we try to see where we can improve through incremental evaluations. Once you've decided that, this will change the type of research that you're gonna do in terms of, is it behavioral, attitudinal, etc. So let's get into it. There is this graph that I really like, which puts research methods into this graph, this 2D graph, with both the 2 scales, being intertwined. The idea of the behavior is to measure what people do. So you're gonna look at people, or you're gonna receive data that comes from people's behavior. And attitudinal is what people say. So usually it's something internal that they need to express. Qualitative means that it's why. So you could look at people do what they do and wonder why they're doing it, or you could listen to people say what they say and wonder why they're saying that, why they're feeling that way. So you're going deep into the reasons and the how and the processes, thought processes. Quantitative, on the other hand, is the what or the how many. So again, you can want to measure how many people do what those people are doing, or you want to maybe understand how many people are feeling the same way as what those people are saying. And I like to give a little bit of an example of different study methods where they go. For instance, the surveys, they go directly into attitude and quantitative because surveys are just people who declare, it's declarative. No, that's French. Sorry. They just say, or they just express their experiences through words or through choices, but you don't actually see them doing them. And most surveys are quantitative. It's not that qualitative surveys don't exist, but it's not used as much as like that. On the other hand, A/B testing is 100% behavioral. You don't really know why people chose A or B, but you just know that more people did A than B, or vice versa. I saw there's a question from Julia in the chat. The question is, what is the difference between the target description and psychographics? Or you don't work with it? I'm sorry, Julia, I didn't really understand your question. I guess you're talking about here, the step 6. A psychographic usually is another word for emotional criteria. I kind of tend to switch between the two. Psychographic is a way to define internal psychological elements, measurements. So how much you like something, how much you dislike something, how much you're attracted to something, how much you are interested in something. Usually, I'm thinking the target description, you're talking about the broad description. The broad description, the idea is to have a high-end view. Sometimes you will not need to cut those the description into smaller criteria. But the idea here is to say that if you're going to be very specific about the type of users you want to meet, just a broad description is not going to be enough. I am not 100% sure I did answer your question, so please let me know in the chat. In the meanwhile, I'm just going to continue. So for here, I'm just going to do one example. I'm going to use my Blue app, my wellness app. So as we said, are we doing generative or evaluative? Clearly here, we are trying to understand our existing onboarding process. Is there something wrong with it? Is our value proposition not clear? So we are in a process of evaluating what's working, what's not working with our app. So clearly, this is going to be an evaluative study. On the other hand, for the yellow app, as you see, we're really getting into a new market. So here it would be more generative. What are we trying to learn? Are we trying to measure or trying to understand why? Well, clearly, we already have measures. We know where the drop rates are. We know what our sign-up rates are. Clearly, we're not really trying to understand how much or how many. We're trying to understand why it's not working. So we're probably going to be pretty far back here. Because it's a scale, as I showed you in the graph, it could be in the middle, it could be there, it could be completely qualitative. I'm thinking maybe we could have something mostly qualitative, but maybe there is some data we'd like to uncover to come and complete the data we already have. This is purely fictional, of course. I do not know, this app doesn't exist. And then are we trying to understand what people are doing, or are we trying to understand how they're, well, ask them why they're doing it? Again, there's a higher chance that this is going to be attitudinal because we have the data. We know that at this step there's a problem, so we already have behaviors. We just don't understand why those behaviors are and how we should change our products so that those behaviors change. So here's a description that I came up with for something like that. Maybe I would try to do if I was in their shoes. Why not start with an interview? about their current habits with um, their well-being apps or their well-being schedule. And then since we do have this question about the perception of our value proposition, maybe test the website together, then test the app and look at them go through the onboarding process end to end so that we understand at each step what they're expecting. And here we clearly are in the qualitative and attitudinal, because the behavioral, especially the behavioral of whether or not they're going to complete the onboarding is moot at this point, because they are in a test. So they will do the onboarding to the end. There's no question about it. But then maybe if we wanted to know if they in a real life they would have completed the onboarding to the end, or if they would have activated, since activation rates are also an issue for this research, we could, for instance, complete that with a diary study of 3 weeks, where we ask them every couple of days or once a week through, for instance, WhatsApp, to use the app and to give us their feedback. And just to be sure that they would have really activated, we could try to see if they would take the 80% discount on our premium version, because if they're ready to pay something, then maybe that means that we actually did deliver some type of value, whereas if not, then even if they did give us great feedback here during the 3 weeks, maybe it just means that actually none of that was like in terms of behavior. If it was not within the test, maybe they wouldn't have kept using the app for 3 weeks. So those could be interesting elements. And at this rate, at the diary study part, we could actually measure the usage and conversion rate. And that could be the little bit of quantitative data that I'm saying that could come and help us complete those existing data. So that's just an example, of course. Norman, I think we can choose 2 methodologies. Yes, you can. You can, but then steps 9 and 10 are here to bring you back to to reality. But yes, it's possible. Like I just did. I'm trying to, because the thing is that this canvas is not used to, you don't need to use it especially for projects. You could use it for continuous research. You could use it for a mixed method research. That there's no constraint about that. This is really as you wish. But as long as what you're doing here helps you with uncovering those business research questions, so that you can answer those business questions. That's the main point, really. And if it's big, if it's a huge study like this one, it requires at least 3 weeks and a diary study, and then the discount. So you see, it can be pretty big. Then the element of the timeline and constraints is where you're gonna be able to say, okay, is that realistic in the time frame I have? I hope that I answered your question. I'll just gonna try to go very fast because I see that it's already almost 7:30, and I do not want to take too much of your time. So this was our description for our methodology. I'll just go very quick on the last 3 steps anyways. A field guide, the step 8 is the field guide, is mostly here as a way for you to remember that you have to do it. Just having a broad description of what your method is going to be, it's not going to be enough. You actually still have to do the whole the main part of the preparing for your research with this, which is defining exactly what tasks, writing the questions of your survey, things like that. The goal here, I'm just proposing for you to put a link here so that if other people from your team want to know where you're at, you can get access to it and they can challenge it if needed. But I do not think it's realistic to have you create the field guide in the scope of the canvas. It would be too much and it would be impossible to make it fit into an A3. Then yes, Rebecca. And when I talk about field guide, I'm talking about the test plan. It's the same. The last 2 points are participant sources. So where do you think you're going to find your people who will go through this research with you? There are several places where you can find participants. It can be, you can use your existing database. You can ask for the help of your sales people or your customer success people. You can use your social media. You can create a campaign online with paid campaigns, or you can go through a panel provider or a recruiting tool like us to find the right people. And here, clearly, the idea is for you to make sure that according to what you're trying to achieve, you have a chance to find them. For instance, since we are interested in churn users, we probably are going to be using a mailing on our churned users, especially if we have the data of who's a churned user or not. But you don't only want churned users, you also want people who do not know us. And so maybe what you're going to try is you're going to post online in communities about wellness, well-being, or maybe you're going to ask a panel provider, or maybe maybe an influencer out there who could help you reach out to his community, his or her community. And then the last point is the timeline and the constraints. This is where you evaluate everything that you've written, and you're like, okay, but sourcing the participant, how long is it going to take? This study method, how long is it going to take? Do we have the time for that? Do we have a deadline that we need to respect? Do we have budget limits? Do we have resource limits? Maybe this thing with the interviews and the 3 weeks diary study, maybe it requires a team of 5, and right now there's only 2 researchers available, so that's not possible. Or maybe we just can't wait for the 3 weeks. That's going to be too long. So maybe in the end, we get back to here the methodology and we just remove the bits about the diary study and we just do an interview and a test of the website and basta. Because we have those time and resource constraints, and we have either to make them more flexible so that we can get in everything inside, or we have to cut down on our initial plan so that we can respect it. The reason why this is step 10 and not step 6 is because I want the teams to be able to go through the ideal plan and then adjust this to compare to their actual limitations, so that if, for instance, you're discussing with other teams or a stakeholder, you can use this as a how it's called, as a basis for discussion, saying, okay, this is what we want to do, but it doesn't fit in those constraints. So either you give us less constraints, or either we do less, but we get less answers. That's it. Thank you, Damien. Good evening. I had forgotten to close the parentheses. So this is the step by step. I will, thank you, Melis. I will now, those are the promise the last bits of the presentation, when to use the canvas. The goal of this tool is to really be as flexible as possible. I'll get back to you and after I finish the presentation. So as flexible as possible. And as I said before, what I really like about A3 canvases, like the Lean UX canvas or business canvas, is that you can use them however you want. And for this canvas, the idea is that you can, if you want, you can use that as a checklist of things not to forget about whenever you start going into research. You can use this as something that you send out to stakeholders before you go into research, so that you collect necessary information, also that they have an idea of what key steps need to be done before you start. You can use this as a workshop deliverable, something that where everyone gathers together and you do it together in 1 or 2 hours, and make sure that every involved stakeholders can be there too, so that they have an idea of why you're doing the research and what you're planning to do, and everyone comes out of the workshop aligned, or at least people who couldn't come here get the canvas as a deliverable and can read it and challenge it. And finally, you can use this as training material for junior researchers or designers or product managers before they start their research. Going to research. For instance, when I was the junior designer that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I think that I would have loved to have a tool like that, because it would really have helped me understand what was wrong with the way that we were framing the research. And finally, where do you get the canvas? Right now, it's you can download it from our website as a PDF. You can get it directly on Figma, on FigJam in the Figma community. And it also is live on Miro. Actually, not really, because they asked me to change a couple of things, so it's not yet completely published, but I'm working on it. And I didn't think that would be days before they actually get back to you. So that is it for the presentation. I know there were some questions that I skipped, but please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn if necessary. I always try to answer everyone. And I would be really, really grateful if you could answer this tiny survey, four questions max, where you tell me what I could improve on the content, if you liked it, if you found it interesting. Thank you so much, everyone, for the comments. And I do see a couple of questions I didn't answer. I see, for instance, there's Rebecca's, where you mentioned that you can work closely with sales teams to understand motivators of clients and who is willing to provide feedback. Yes, clearly, that is 100% one way of sourcing participants, especially in B2B. I always stress this with every single client I have, is like, if you have if you are in B2B, leverage your sales team, find allies within the sales team that will help you get to those clients, so that you can ask them questions directly. What you do not want is sales teams to gate the access to those clients, but that's why you could have sales teams representatives come into the workshop with you and do the canvas with you, so that they can really understand why you're doing it and what you're really planning on doing, and so that they can chime in and challenge you, and in the end be aligned with, okay, if this is what the content of the research is, I am okay with that, and I will help you. Yes, the one by Patrick. Would it be helpful to prioritize or even eliminate initial research questions and hypotheses, or at least distribute them into distinct canvases? As some hypotheses or research questions may demand different methods, it could become a mess when running the research, especially with time and resource constraints. So basically, you're asking kind of the same question as no one with this. Are we sure that we want to have in one canvas, like, be able to have several hypotheses that we want to test, which could lead in several target audiences, which could lead in several research methods to be employed? Yes, I think that that could be an issue, but the truth is, the reason why this is in an A3 format is because the boxes are smaller. You have to go straight to the point. So if you realize that what you're writing is starting to, spill out of the canvas, then it also is a flag for you to be like, okay, maybe we're being too ambitious. Maybe this is not one research project. Maybe this is like 3 different research projects. Maybe we should talk about that. Because the goal is for the canvas it's not just for you to fill in the boxes like a checklist. Of course, you can use it that way, but it's also to foster collaboration and discussions within the team. So clearly, if you start filling in your methodology point here, and then you both want to do generative and evaluative and quantitative and qualitative and behavioral and attitudinal, and then the description is like has 10 post-its in it, then clearly you have to ask yourself the question within your team of, okay, are we doing one research project or several? Or maybe we shouldn't be doing research. Maybe there's like things beforehand, like I was saying, maybe the business question is too broad, and so that means that there's a strategic layer that we have to add and get into before we get into the research. I hope that answers your question. And there was, can you give me an example for a test guide? So I'm sorry, and I don't know if you're still here, but actually, right now I do not have one that I can slot into to show you, but there are great resources out there about how to build a test guide. I would recommend resources from Nikki Anderson, for instance. She writes for the Dovetail team on the blog, but she also has her own blog. which is very, very interesting. And she has amazing resources on not only how to, for instance, frame research, but also how to create a good test guide. So if you're looking for resources on that, I would definitely recommend hers. Um, Rahim is asking if there's any tips for recruiting for B2B. There is the B2B incentives. So yeah, Marin already linked a couple of resources, but B2B, there's several ways of trying to reach B2B people. First of all, paid incentives, it's not that they don't work, it's just that you need to give the right incentive for the right people. At Tandems, for instance, we, for B2B audiences, if they are like middle managers or top managers, the incentive will not be the same and will be much higher for top managers just because their time is valuable, they will not take the time to talk to you unless the incentive is high enough. The other thing that you can add, which usually is helpful, if you promise to give them at least part of the reports that you get from your research. Because usually, if what you're trying to, especially for generative research, if you're trying to discuss things like how do you use AI or what do you think the future of your industry is going to be, they're usually willing to share their thoughts, especially if they know that in return they will get an idea of what other people in their industry are thinking. And that usually works pretty well. It might not be enough though, because if you're asking for like 3 hours of the time, just a report at the end is not going to be enough. But for instance, a survey of maybe 20-30 minute survey, which is pretty long, and usually people don't do such long surveys, the promise of having the report at the end could be enough. Lastly, if you're building a B2B product, that could really interest them. Promising to get the product for free, either as a lifetime value or like for a couple of years, is also a way of getting their attention. But the caveat is that if your product is something like you need their perspectives, but the truth is they don't necessarily are going to be the people to use you, then it could not work. Did I answer your questions, Brahim, Rebecca? And if there are any more questions, feel free to ask. And otherwise, since it's already 7:41, I will. Oh, and I forgot, but please scan my QR code and answer my questionnaire, my survey. Well, in that case, I will not take up any more of your time. It's already 7:41 here. It's 10 minutes longer than I expected. I really hope that you enjoyed the content. I really hope that you will try out the canvas. And if you do, please give me some feedback, because I would really, really love to hear what people have to say about it. That would be really amazing. I will stop recording now, and I will see you at another time. Bye bye, everyone.